Today, we're going all the way across the pond to Sarah Burns, who is an Instagram legend. Sarah Burns, what are you going to do today?
Today, we are doing very, very beginner-friendly little exercises to learn how to paint with gouache.
Awesome. You know, you're such a good gouache painter. You brought your gouache to the Adirondacks this summer, all the way from Scotland.
Yeah.
And you're in northern Scotland.
Yep.
And so that's even further.
Yes.
And everybody was gaga over your demo. You did a demo at the Publisher's Invitational. Everybody's like drooling at how good. So you're going to do some of that today, right? You're going to kind of show us what.
Yeah, I'm going to show you my basic techniques that I use in all of my paintings, really. So if you can nail these techniques, you can kind of apply them to anything you want to paint.
That's awesome. Well, I took gouache with me to China. I'm loving gouache. We have our Gouache Live event coming up around the corner. So I am excited about doing this. Let's get this show officially started.
Okay.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhoads. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhoads.
Welcome to Art School Live. We're here every weekday at 12 noon. I was just looking at the comments, and Joanna, I think it was Joanna in here, said that she discovered us last night and she binged watched a whole bunch of shows. And so now she's going to watch it live. Welcome to everybody here. We're here every weekday at 12 noon, and we have been since COVID began. And the goal here is to give you free art lessons, free. And of course, we can go in depth with you at other times with other things we offer, but we want you to learn this. And we believe anybody can learn to paint. Anybody can learn to paint. Today is a really good example of that because we're going to be painting in gouache. Gouache is a medium which is water-based, so it's a little like watercolor. And you can make it kind of like watercolor, but it's also opaque, meaning you can't see through it. So it works more like oil. And it's really hot right now. A lot of people are doing it, traveling with it. And so we're going to learn about that today. Sarah Burns is our guest, and let's look at some of her artwork right now, just so you can get a feel for what she does. Now, these are gouache paintings, and they look to me like oil paintings. They don't look like watercolor paintings, and that's the difference, is that you get the ability to have the effects of both. Let's look at what else we have here. Oh, that's lovely. Very nice. And then we have one more, I believe. There we go, a tree. So we're going to get right to Sarah Burns, and Sarah's coming to us from Scotland. Okay, Sarah, you and I met at the Publisher's Invitational in the Adirondacks, my retreat. What was that like for you?
That was really wonderful. And just a little backstory, my dad lives in upstate New York, so I'm kind of familiar with that region, but I had never been to the Adirondacks, and I'd always wanted to go. And it was an amazing, relaxing, but also in a way tiring week because we painted nonstop every day. And I made a lot of great art friends. I was just texting with my roommate from the trip, which is really cool. And I painted so many paintings and I felt like I grew a lot that week.
Yeah.
Well,
you know, it's interesting. They on Sunday, the New York Times did a story on adult overnight camps, and people are actually finding and making friends. And like we kind of began that trend 15 years ago because you go there not knowing anybody and you leave knowing a lot of people.
Yeah. That was one of the cool parts, is by the end of the week, you're like saying hi to your friends that you just met, but you felt like you've known forever. And everyone's like, are you coming back next year? When are we going to see you again? And yeah, it was a cool feeling.
Yeah. Well, and we have a lot of people who've been back 10, 15 years in a row. So
I know, that's amazing.
Well, listen, I didn't bring you on to promote that event, but thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, so hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, we are going to kind of be nerding out about gouache. This is kind of a Gouache 101 lesson, kind of an abridged version, because there's a lot we could cover and we could talk for this about gouache for weeks. But my goal is to give you a few repeatable exercises. And if you've never used gouache, that's totally okay. This is for you. Or if you're maybe you haven't used it in a while and you're trying to get back into it. But the whole point is to give you some repeatable strategies, repeatable techniques that you can use, whether you paint landscapes, portraits, whatever, you can apply it to all of those things. And so to get started, we are going to jump to the paint screen. And first, I think it's helpful, or at least I'm the kind of artist who finds it helpful to know the why behind things, or the what. So we should know what gouache is and what gouache isn't. And the biggest thing that I've heard is that everyone calls gouache an opaque watercolor, which is kind of true. Gouache has the same binder as watercolor. It's made of gum arabic, which looks like this. It's little, well, you can get it in dried form as well as liquid form. And it's water soluble, just like watercolor is, but there are a few fun and quirky properties to gouache, which makes it unique. And technically there are two kinds of gouache. There's traditional artist gouache, which is re-wettable, and you can actually paint on, this is a gouache painting that is not sealed. If I got this wet, I could reactivate these layers and move them around and mess with it. So that's a very unique thing about gouache. But there's also acrylic gouache, which is, it has a polymer binder, so it actually dries permanently, just like acrylic. But it does have a matte finish. Just so I have these two side by side, so you can kind of see they look the same. They're matte. If I tilt them, you can see. But I don't know if you've ever done this, Eric, but have you ever dropped water or splashed your painting after finishing it, and maybe you didn't realize it right away? So after the painting, you notice you have a drop of water on it, and you just gasp because you know that means the gouache is going to lift when you try to dry it off or when you try to pick it up. So one of the fun things I like to do is when I first get my gouache, whether it's traditional or acrylic, I will do a little test swatch of every single color. And with acrylic especially, I like to get it wet and I like to scrub as hard as I can with a really stiff brush. And you can see it barely changed it, didn't really lift it up. This is regular traditional gouache, and I got it wet. And now I can lift it, especially if I have a little paper towel. I can start lifting it and moving it around, or I could introduce a new color to this and start shifting it into like a yellow, a orange, or a purple or something like that. So it's kind of
So why would somebody use traditional gouache instead of acrylic gouache?
I would use it, and I say it's quirky and finicky, but that's the reason I would use it. This whole thing that you can re-wet it and blend pretty much indefinitely, to me, is what makes it amazing and special. So I will often let my first layer dry. I will go have a break, go have a snack, or even come back a day or two later, and I will be able to re-wet it a little bit and work into it, just like oils, I guess, because with oils they don't dry super fast or cure fast, so you can kind of always blend it back into something you've done. I mean, once they're permanent, but with gouache, you can always come back and change it, re-wet it, and
there are some papers you can use where you can bring it all the way down to white without it.
Yeah. Some papers are very forgiving. You can scrub it till it comes right off, which is really interesting. And some of the colors out there are much more staining than others. You kind of learn which colors are which after a while, after you get used to them. But that's another reason I love doing swatches. So when you're off camera, when you're on your own, if you have a rainy day, I highly recommend doing swatches of all of your colors. I usually do them in either like little sketchbooks like this, or on loose sheets of paper, so that I can just kind of hold them up and compare them to each other and compare different color families and different brands. And I also recommend you do the swatch, but then also mix the swatch down into white, because that's going to be a very useful color with gouache. We'll talk about why. Because there is so much pigment packed into gouache. It's one of the things that makes it really special, I think. It's so saturated. I almost look at it like it's a liquid version of pastel, because if you think about pastel, it's a solid chunk of pigment and you can draw with it. The pigment is there. It's in its purest form on the paper. And gouache really feels like that to me, especially when you use it straight out of the tube. And there's so much pigment packed into these tubes. Yes, they have the binders and they have all the other things in there, but it's a lot of pigment, and the pigment particles are a little bit bigger. So they reflect or show us that pure color a lot more intensely than some watercolors do. That's why I think it often looks like pastel, especially when it's dry, when it's matte. It's got that vibrant finish to it. But one of the things that makes it a little strange is that, or different, I guess, to acrylic, is you can't quite paint super thick with it. So I have a watercolor and acrylic background before I started doing gouache, and I was really used to painting with a thick palette knife application with my acrylic. And so when I started with gouache, I was thinking I could do something similar with my palette knife, but this is what happens when you paint too thick with gouache, especially if it's on a bendable surface, a surface that is not very stable. So I don't know if you can see, I just did these swatches earlier with my palette knife. I just sweeped it on very thinly, and those are already starting to crack and crumble off of the paper. So it kind of shows you that there's so much pigment and not quite enough binder to really hold this paint to the paper if it's used thickly. And it's just one of the quirks with it. So if you want to use it a little bit more like oil, you can use it kind of thick and juicy, but not to the point where where the edges are raised up off of the paper, and you wouldn't use a palette knife with it. So let's jump into our first little exercise. We are going to talk about brushes, and not necessarily like a brand of brush or anything like that, but type of brush, because I have found water control is probably one of the most important things with gouache and one of the trickiest things with gouache, because the more water you introduce into the mix, the more it's going to dilute and the less opaque it's going to be. So one of the beautiful things about gouache is layering light on top of dark. So if you look at these textures and these lighter colors on top of those dark colors, that's one of the things that makes it different and special compared to watercolor, especially. So if you want to get that effect, you can't dilute it too much. So knowing how much water is in your brush at all times is really, really important. So if you're painting along with me, grab a flat brush and a round brush. It could be any size, any type. And we're also going to be painting with fresh gouache out of the tube. So you can pick any color you like. I'll just go with primary magenta. And I'll put the palette next to me. We can, if we have time at the end, we could talk about supplies, like different types of palettes and stuff like that. But I know
that's exactly the same palette I use.
Yeah, this came out of one of my watercolor palettes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's my oldest palette, and it just takes up so little space. I like having it on the desk.
Well, and you can pick it up and throw it under the sink and just run.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yep. And it does stain because it is plastic eventually, but I have so many different palettes around. I like ceramic trays as well.
Too. I go to the Pier 1 or something and get pure white ceramic trays.
Yep. And if you don't have that at home, you probably have a ceramic plate in your cupboard. You can probably use that. Just don't use the fine china, maybe. Okay. So the first thing you'll start noticing is the different thicknesses in the hairs. There's soft hairs, there's stiff hairs, there's all sorts of different ways they make brushes. And the softness will also play an effect when it comes to layering, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the thickness and the body of the brush will probably be the biggest thing. So I tend to use flat brushes because they're much thinner. They don't hold quite as much water, and I'm more easily able to tell how much gouache is on my brush versus how much water. Same with a watercolor brush, like they're both watercolor brushes as well. I don't know if anyone makes specifically gouache brushes, but I tend to use them interchangeably. I use them for both. But a round brush like this has a big body that soaks up a ton of water and pigment, and then it tapers off to a fine point. So the water is going to be held in this bigger part, and you can get fine details with the point, which is also kind of a fun technique. And they both have their uses. They both can be really helpful for different techniques. But the first thing we'll do is just get the paint on the brush. And I tend to start with pretty thick. You can see it's noticeable on the brush. It's not soaked in all the way. It's kind of just sitting on top of the hairs. And the first thing we'll do is just do a clean sweep. And we'll just go to the edge of the paper and just leave it, because we want to see how that dries. We want to see how it's darker and thicker here, and then it sort of soaked into the paper and started tapering off, and it got a lot drier on the right side. And that's just a very common brushstroke application with a flat brush. Then with the round brush, and both times all I did was get the brush wet, and then I soaked up the excess water. So there's barely any water left in this. It's just a little bit to get it kind of moist. And that's what I do almost every time, is I dip it in the water and then I kind of rub the excess off on a paper towel or a sponge. And then we will dip it in the gouache. And already you're going to notice how the point of the brush is going to load up on pigment, and the body is going to soak up a lot of the water or the diluted gouache. So when you apply it, whether it's like this or like this, you're going to notice that the pointy end pointing away from you is going to hold more of the gouache, and this part is going to be a little bit more soft and diluted. And both of these were pretty dry brush strokes. But you can see here, it's a lot lighter pink just at the underneath this part where the water was soaking in that brush. And obviously this is just one example of one brush stroke in a million that you're going to use in a painting. But as you go, you really get a feel for how different they can be. So we'll just touch it into the water to get it a little bit more diluted, a little bit juicier. And we'll do the same thing, but this time with a little more water. And that's really going to show how that application, the point is holding all the gouache and the water is held down here. So you're going to get a thicker, darker color at the top and a lighter, softer color at the bottom. Then with the flat brush, same thing. If we dilute it a little more, we can get more of a solid brush stroke. But even so, the first part of that brush stroke is thicker and darker, and at the end of it, as I sweep it away, it starts soaking all that water up, and it's going to be a little bit lighter. So these tiny little differences will make a difference when you start painting, especially when you start layering, knowing that your first second or two touching the paper is going to be the strongest color and the most opaque color. And if I do another brush stroke and another brush stroke, it's just going to gradually get lighter and lighter and softer. And if you're layering, you're also going to be reactivating the layer below the more you touch it, which is we'll talk about layering soon. So those two things, just take one sheet of paper and do these kinds of tests side by side. And if you really want to see, if you really want to practice wet or dry brush, this is a great opportunity to test out your different brushes, because all the brushes you buy are going to have different results and have different looks to them. So if you want a really dry brush effect, don't put hardly any water on your brush. Just get as much pigment as you can and very gently just caress the surface of the paper and see how broken that is. That's a really beautiful way to layer color. So if you look at this tree trunk, that is like 3 or 4 dry brush layers on top of each other. Kind of the same thing with the green in the background. So this exact strategy, that very dry brush, just gentle over the paper, is exactly what you'll do.
From the audience,
Yep.
Susan is asking, do you use some kind of fixative on your finished paintings?
You can, but I personally don't. I have done a little bit. They do change the color slightly. A lot of times it'll darken it and maybe just shift the color ever so slightly. So if I can help it, I don't. But I also don't sell a lot of original gouache, so I don't really need to like keep them stacked in my drawer. And occasionally I have framed them and they're underneath like UV glass and stuff like that. But I have seen artists.
I found a spray that works really well with gouache, and it doesn't seem to darken it.
Oh, great. Yeah, if you link to it or something, I'm sure everyone would love to see that. So with the with the round brush, it can be a little trickier to get a very even dry brush stroke because again, the tip is going to hold a lot of that pigment. So we'll just load it up and maybe kind of when you're pressing it into your pile, press it down so that the hairs really flatten the gouache against it. So it gets a little bit more coated more evenly. A lot of times I'm just kind of tapping into my pile of gouache there. And then what we'll do is we will hold it parallel to the paper like this, and we will sweep it back and forth. And if maybe I'll hold it up closer to the camera so you can see, just very, very gentle pressure. And a lot of times with a round brush, you might accidentally get a sliver because you accidentally touch the point with it. That's something you want to really be careful to avoid. So if you can kind of make sure the brush tip is rounded up away from the paper and you're just touching the side of it here. It's all very subtle movements. And I think that's something you have to be really patient with gouache when you're first getting into it, especially with these beginning days, the beginning techniques. And the other thing I find a huge way that these two types of brush differ is when you're doing a gradient of some kind. So maybe we'll just...
Can you explain, David wants to know, are these cold press papers?
Yeah, these are 50% cotton, so they're not like super fancy or anything like that. They're just a little bit cold pressed. There's a little bit of texture to them, so that does make that dry brush much easier. If you're using super smooth paper, it's going to be a lot trickier to get that bumpy kind of rough effect. But you can still do it. It's just got to go very, very subtle, very soft.
Experiment with a lot of different papers and such.
Oh yeah, I've tried so many. I tend to like the more textured stuff, and at least 50% cotton, if not 100%. And like the thicker stuff is my favorite.
I have been lately. I've been painting on masonite panels with gouache that are primed, and it's really, really wonderful. The other thing I've been trying is oil paper.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I took actually oil primed panels, thin ones, and they were actually pretty wonderful.
Do you have to roughen the surface at all?
Did I what?
Do you like kind of like sand the surface at all or make it like rough?
I didn't have to, but I had to make sure that my stuff wasn't too watery or it wouldn't stick at the beginning.
Right.
But they ended up, I ended up with a painting in a museum as a result of that. So it was cool.
Wow, awesome. And they're ready to go if they're already on a panel. So that's great.
Oh yeah, that's what's nice.
Yeah, so one of the things I find a big difference between the round and the flat brushes is when it comes to doing the gradient. So if we start with a light color and we start sweeping it on, I don't have a lot of water. You can see how much gouache is visible on the hairs. Just lay that in and start touching in my next color. So when you mix, gouache is so strong. All you need to do is touch the tiniest little corner of your brush into that color and look how powerful that is. It's already shifting to an intense orange. And then we'll get way down into the oranges here. I'm painting on my desk just for fun. So what I find is it's kind of easy to get 3 gradients started with the flat brush and then clean my brush off completely and then come back in and blend them a little softer, a little easier between the colors, between the transitions. But that's why gouache is so beautiful, because I can reactivate it like that. If it was, acrylic and it was already drying permanently, I would end up with those big, streaky, chunky marks. But with gouache, even tomorrow I could come back in and soften it and keep layering it and blending that gradient down. When you are doing it with a round brush, I find it a little trickier, and I tend to use more water with the round brush because the application just feels a little bit different. So I will dip my brush in the water, or in the pigment, sorry, and like coat it very thoroughly. And then I will dip just the tip of it in the water to get a little bit of water on there and get it nice and smooth. And then I will start applying it and slowly start dipping in my next color. Again, because the point of the brush is a little bit, it's holding more of the pigment, I know that if I want to get a soft blend, I could maybe use the side of my brush like this, or just keep going with the tip and just work quickly. But again, I don't know, it's just a personal thing. I find it a lot trickier to make these soft gradients with a round brush because I have to deal with the pointy side versus the thick side that's holding all the water. Yeah, maybe it's just a thing you get used to over time. And then I'll just keep touching.
Gouache is gouache will stick to almost any surface.
Yeah, it likes anything porous, I think.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah. Well, you can use it on aluminum panels too.
With any kind of ground or just like regular? I've never tried.
You can just paint right on top of it. Same with copper.
So try just a whole sheet of comparing the flat brush and the round brush first. And I know this probably seems so basic, but trust me, this kind of thing will help so much when it comes time to painting a real, like a landscape or whatever kind of painting you like to do. Knowing your brushes, knowing your tools is going to go so far in helping, get the look that you're trying to go for in your painting. If you know you have a sky that's like a soft sunset gradient, knowing how to use your brush to get that gradient is key. So don't underestimate doing these very, very simple techniques. And I go back and do them all the time just to kind of refamiliarize myself with different things. And like, it's never, ever a waste of time.
So what are you going to do next?
Next, we are going to do a little blending exercise, which kind of is similar to this, but it's at first, it seems easy. We're going to do a little sphere. One is going to be adding white. One is going to be adding yellow as the highlight. And with
why don't we do this? Let's take a quick break.
Yeah,
and then
sure.
We'll be right back.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll get my paper set up.
Okay. Our guest today is 𝗤𝗏𝗵, and you are watching Art School Live. We're here every weekday at 12 noon. And we're just really happy that you guys are here. So please go ahead and subscribe to the program if you get a chance. Just go on YouTube and hit subscribe for Art School Live. Now, the other thing is we have an event coming up this Saturday. We've been working on this for months and months and months, and it is called Gouache Live. Gouache Live is a one-day, full-day event featuring some of the world's leading gouache artists, including the great Scott Christensen and many, many others. You will not want to miss this. It's really going to be spectacular. It's a full day on Saturday. If you can't make the day, you can still get replays. And we've got thousands of people coming from all over the world. So we hope you'll join us for Gouache Live. Just go to, it's like 𝗏𝗏𝗵. That's how you spell it. 𝗏𝗏𝗵. gouachelive.com. Also want to mention to you guys that I have an event coming up this fall. I do these retreats. Sarah and I talked about my Adirondack retreat. I do that in the spring every year in June. And I have two others. I do one in the winter and I do one in the fall. The next one is coming up. It's called Fall Color Week. It's being held this year where the color is super intense in Door County, Wisconsin. We try to move it around so everybody can have a chance to drive to it or get to it if they want to. This is about 4 hours north of Chicago. And it's spectacular color, lots to paint, lots of white lighthouses, Lake Michigan, lots of farms. And we paint all day together for a week. We feed you breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We hang out together. We sing at night. We do crafts. We just have a lot. It's like adult camp for summer camp for adults in the fall. Anyway, we'd love for you to come. Just go to fallcolorweek.com gouache.com. We have a free gouache gift for you today, and make sure you get this new ebook that we have. It is called 7 Amazing Gouache Tips, and you can get it by just going to gouachelive.com, 7 reasons. I'm going to repeat that, gouachelive.com, 7 reasons. Okay, now back to Sarah Burns. Sarah, now we're going to do blending. We're going to do a sphere. This is exciting. All right.
But in application, you find there's a little trick to it, little nuances. So first thing I'm going to do is get my flat brush. And I like a flat brush for this exercise. You could use a round brush, whatever you feel comfortable with. And I'm going to load up a lot of gouache on there. See how much that is? It's kind of sitting on the edge there. And I'm just going to swirl it around until I get my sphere. And the point of this exercise is not only to practice blending, but also to show you how powerful white is. And the thing is with gouache, because it's such a strong color, each color, each tube is so highly pigmented, you rarely want to paint a full painting with those raw colors. So you'd either need to mix them together, which is pretty much in every painting, and or add white. So white is going to lighten the color. It's also going to desaturate it, which is really useful because, again, they're so strong. But it's one of those things, and I've heard oil painters talk about this, how once you add white, it is so hard to get rid of. It is so tricky in a mix. So all we're going to do is lay a single brush stroke of white over the right side. Imagine the light's coming from this way. And it doesn't matter if it's wet, the blue is wet or dry, because again, you can always reactivate it. And this is where water control comes so key. So what I'm going to do is clean my brush off. And I've almost always got a paper towel ready to go in my hand. And I'm going to clean it off. And now I'm going to start touching the edges of that white and just see, this is a good little test to show how quickly and how much that white is going to start activating that blue. So already we've lost most of the white and it's become tinted with the blue. And now if I brush even more over that edge, we can start dragging that white down the sides of the sphere, or I guess there's not a side.
Looks like a pool ball.
Yeah, there we go. We could even draw numbers on it. And by now, after every couple brush strokes, the brush is completely covered in the paint. So I'm going to wet it or wipe it off completely and then mostly dry it. So it's damp to the touch, but it's not dripping at all. And I can continue to sort of brush the clean brush over and try to soften the edges. You'll notice if you add too much white that it is going to fill the circle really quickly. So you only need a little bit. And then if we want to make it more of an intense highlight, we can really try to soften. You might also find your hairs start separating in the brush, which I find extremely useful for some things and extremely annoying for other things. For this instance, it's annoying. So I'm going to keep refreshing it. As I say, I'll dip it in water, flatten it out. Sometimes I'll even press it with my fingers to make it nice and solid again, like that. And then I can really gently, with very, very little pressure. And then every once in a while, I will kind of squeeze it against my paper towel like that. And I will gently kind of pull and push the gouache. So already it's mostly dry. You can see a tiny bit of moisture in the surface, but all along the edges, the gouache is matte. So that's how you know it's dry. And if you want to add a little highlight, a little dollop, you can do that. Sometimes I add too much. But yeah, you can kind of keep messing with it, keep pushing and pulling. And if you fill your circle with too much white and it just becomes too much to handle, start again. And because again, this is a learning experience. I've also seen a lot of people will touch gouache and then they'll move it with their finger really quick while it's dry or while it's wet. I try not to do that because then I get absolutely covered, and I have cats and then I don't want to get paint on my cats. So just be careful if you do that.
You know, cat hair makes great paint brushes.
Yeah, really soft brushes, right? But I already have cat hair in all of my paintings, so everyone says that increases the value, right? And when we do a painting where maybe we have a color that we want to lighten, but we don't want to desaturate it, I will typically add yellow or another lighter color rather than white. So if we get another sphere, get some yellow on there. I need more yellow on my palette. You start to get a feel for how powerful, how strong, how opaque white is. So this pink, most pinks are in gouache are pretty transparent. That's pretty common. Like certain colors in gouache are going to be quite transparent. Lemon yellow, phthalo blues are really transparent. Quinacridone kind of pinks or operas, those bright pink colors. Some reds are also really transparent. So knowing that ahead of time is really helpful. So if you're layering, you want to, if you want to use an opaque color versus a transparent color to make it stronger. Okay, I'm getting it on a tangent. Let's keep going with this. So now I'm kind of going back and forth between the pink and the light color. Because this is a more transparent color, the white would have been more opaque. It's a little harder to find the right ratio of the color I need to keep it bright. Whereas the white, it's almost impossible to get rid of. So I will go back and forth between the color and the yellow, and I'll just keep doing the same strategy. So I'll get my brush clean, and then I'll touch the edge, and then I'll clean it off, and then I'll kind of sweep it and touch the edge. If you're working really, really thick, it can be a lot trickier to get these gentle, soft changes in color. You might get more like oil paint effect, which is something some people really want. If you're trying to get a super smooth, completely blended effect, you might want to use a little bit less paint. But again, that's why we do these exercises. It's really helpful to kind of see what colors are going to do on your paper. So yeah, let's continue on. Hopefully we don't, if anyone has any questions about this application, let me know. It's one of those that you just got to try. You got to see how it feels. And of course, in an actual lighting situation, we would have a darker shadow on the bottom edge, and we would have a shadow coming off of the sphere, but we're just doing it really simple. This is more just about the blending and trying to get that light effect on the sphere. So I feel like it's more obvious when you do it rather than watch it, but the pink is really quickly devouring the yellow that I'm adding, and the white, the blue and the white, the white kind of took over the blue. So it was the opposite effect.
So just for grins, why don't you just quickly show us what would happen if you put white into a red?
White into a red. Yeah. So like just do it on here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it would turn a lot more pink, a lot more pale. And again, you can do the same technique where you add the white and then you soften your brush, you get it clean, and you touch the edge to drag it and soften the edge of that highlight. And if your brush the hair starts separating, clean it off. Again, I'm like repeating the same thing over and over again just to get this effect. And if you like that kind of more painterly look, leave the brush strokes visible. But if you're trying to get the very smooth, maybe just doing this exercise to learn how to blend, just keep going until you can get it as soft as you can.
So David is asking, what color would you add to the bottom of the blue ball to show a darker shadow area?
Oh, even the pink would be good. So you can add the pink to the blue. And start layering that in just a little bit. So you can brush it on, and then you can clean your brush off completely. And again, I usually kind of get it flat on the edge, and then I can soften the edge. as I put my wet brush on the blue, it's picking it up. So you can't really see, but there's blue on my brush now. And I can push and pull it just a little. You have to be careful not to scrub, because if you start scrubbing this, it's going to lift it all off the paper and you're going to kind of have to start over. So everything I do is a super gentle layering effect. It's like I'm trying to just gently caress the paper. And I'm using quick little, like, I'm holding my brush very loosely in my hand. I'm using quick little marks like this. I'm not like holding it with a tight grip and scrubbing it at all. And also there are lots of different types of brushes out there. I prefer brushes that have really soft hairs, that are a little bit longer. So if you go to an art store, just feel the brushes. Look for a brush that has a bit longer hair, a little bit softer to the touch, rather than like a short that's kind of like scraggly. You know,
I have actually
those are really useful for some things though.
I've actually found that the cheaper the brushes, the better they work for gouache.
Yeah, there's some amazing, really, really cheap, like golden Taklon hairs are really great. It's all synthetic. It's like really cheap. So just go to the art store and feel around. I'm sure they're used to it.
Well, you're gonna do, what are you gonna do next?
So I was gonna show layering if we have time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just bring me on camera real quick. I want to just show you guys this. This is a painting I did of a Chinese master in China, and this is a gouache painting. And so you can see that I could have used your layering technique there a little bit on the top of the forehead, but anyway, I just wanted to show you.
Yeah, but I like how painterly that is. I tend to prefer to see the brush strokes in the end to see the evidence of the artist. I don't try to overly blend everything, but again, it's all personal preference. So
yeah,
but,
well, that's what I tried to do, is to make it very brush strokey.
Yeah, I just have a little square here to kind of keep it simple. But let's just do a little exercise in blending, or I mean layering. So I'm gonna, when I layer gouache, I try not to go too thick in the first layer. So I'll actually water down my gouache quite a bit. So if you look at my palette, you can see it's pretty milky, pretty thick, but then I'll touch more water in until I could just start to see the palette when I move the paint. I can just start to see the white of the palette through that. Then I know it's going to spread nice and easy across the paper. It's not going to be too thick or too thin. And
so sometimes I'll do a watercolor wash underneath, something really watery and thin. There's a question from Linda K. Can you mix gouache with a heavy body gel to make the texture, or does that crack also?
Good question. I've never tried it.
I've never tried it either, but you know, a gel, you don't need much pigment in it, so it might work.
It would tint it. If it's a strong color, I'm sure it would tint it.
So Patricia is asking, what does painterly mean?
Painterly, I would say, is when you're not trying to be super photorealistic. You want the individual brush strokes to be more visible in the end. Like I know a lot of oil painters do that, so they'll maybe focus a little more detail on their subject or on their focal point, but like a lot of the outer edges or some of the background edges will be just a couple raw brush strokes that aren't mixed together, which I just personally think it's gorgeous.
Have you seen, they're called gel gouache?
Gel gouache.
Yeah.
Jelly cups, jelly gouache.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Yeah, I've seen the cups of gouache. I've tried it.
I haven't tried it. I wonder if you had.
Yeah, I've tried it and I don't love it because I find it's a little too transparent. And the one I got smelled like very strong chemicals, kind of stronger than acrylics actually. So I tend to stick with the tubes. I did pour gouache into a palette and just let it dry, and I use that outside sometimes. It's really quick way to, you can reactivate it with water, so you can use it like watercolor, but then let it sit a little longer and the water will soak in and you can use it thick just like this.
Hey,
so
do you have your sketchbook nearby?
I have a lot of sketchbooks.
Yeah, so grab one, and because we're getting another question about painterly, can you show maybe an example of something that's a little more painterly versus something that's more
so I guess I do have, so one thing I like to do is print out photos and put them next to my paintings so I can always kind of see the difference. And I guess this is an example. So maybe, obviously the photo has a ton of detail in it, but if you look even just here, I've simplified it down to a couple like very rough brush strokes. A lot of it is about simplifying the different types of, oh, here's that painting you showed at the beginning. So little photo, but each brush stroke,
Very loose.
very loose. So like these background trees barely have any detail, but if you kind of look at it all together as a whole painting, it makes sense because our brains are very, very good at making sense of the abstract.
So why do you have a sheet of parchment in between?
So this is a really quick, easy thing to avoid. So if I press these pages together too hard, the gouache on one side can transfer to the other if there's too much friction. So this just means that I don't accidentally smudge my paintings together. And I only really do it if I have like a big painting or like two paintings directly across from each other. Like this is a piece of clear vellum. So those will protect each other. Yeah. So here's another example of very loose trees, just simplified brush strokes.
So you're not rendering exactly, and that would be the difference. Some people render things real exactly and very realistic, and some people want to do things a little looser, and that's what it really means.
Yeah, and it's a totally a stylistic choice, and every artist has the right to do it how they want to do it. So I know we're getting close on time, but I'll just quickly show you. Usually I would spend a little more time making the background a little bit not so streaky, but I just laid in a really thin layer and I let it dry, which doesn't take long if you're using a thin layer of gouache. And with layering, it's a little easier when you have wet gouache like this, thick gouache out of the tube. You can just load up the brush. You can see there's quite a lot of gouache on this. And I will quickly just make my little grass. I'm just going to do grass, I guess. So I will lay in some very quick, loose, again, always going for loose, painterly is my thing. And that's going to dry really fast. But if I want, I could immediately start touching in a lighter green and get a little bit of a softer blend here and there. But then if you want to layer on top, you're going to have to go for stronger color or add white to lighten it. So if you have a more opaque yellow, like a yellow ochre is a great one. Naples yellow light is also a little more opaque. Those ones are great for layering on top of darker grasses. But in this case, I only really have my white here, but I'll just show you by adding white to it and working very thin, like not too globby.
Globby, well, that's a good word.
It's a thing with gouache. You can easily get very globby.
Jacqueline is asking, what limited palette of colors would you recommend for a beginner?
Limited palette? If I
That's
personally,
both for her words. What palette would you recommend for a beginner?
Like what colors?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I personally like to have stronger color because I can always mix muted colors from it. So if I only have like the primaries, I'll go with a quinacridone magenta or a primary magenta, either a ultramarine or cobalt or Prussian blues, something really strong. And then either a Hansa yellow or a bright lemon yellow, something like that, so that I know that I can mix really vibrant, intense color if I want, and I can mix them all together and make mud, make browns, make grays. It's just a more versatile limited palette rather than getting like all of the in-between colors. That's my thing. And then of course you need a lot of white. So white is one of the colors you use just all the time. So I'm just mixing my white and a little bit of yellow with my blue to get that green. And I mean, I do have a tube of green. We could just use that, but I'm just trying to show when you're mixing to get the paint to kind of flow, you do need to add a little bit of water. And you definitely, if you're trying to layer light on top of dark, you need to either add a light color or white. And this is the effect you're going to get. So I like to layer lots of different colors on top of each other to that overlap, and they create a really nice soft effect in the end. But you could just go straight into intense color and just be really bold with it. If we have any last minute questions, now would be a good time, but I think
because we're running out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we could do like 10 more
so
exercises.
quickly with you.
It went really fast.
David is asking, do you ever use a rigger brush when layering grass?
Yes. I have a lot of skinny, long brushes. You can even find these, which are the most skinny, long brush I've ever seen. I forgot what they're really for. They're like liner brushes.
Yeah,
look at that baby.
Fine painter.
Yeah, I have a lot of brushes like that because I like doing long, wispy grasses. So if we had time, I would show my little palette, but.
Okay, so Susan is asking, the palette you're using is not a stay wet type. I imagine your paint dries faster, but is it okay because you can re-wet the color?
Yeah, that's kind of the reason it's okay. But I do have a stay wet palette here. This is it's a airtight palette, and inside is a sponge and a piece of palette paper. Sometimes I'll also use a glass mixing tray like this. So this is like one of my favorites because it's gray, but this lives inside my Stay Wet palette, and I can just close it between sessions and my gouache is fresh the next day or even a couple days later. So I very often use a Stay Wet palette in the studio. Today I just was kind of like saving time and space just using this.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to do essentially what's called glazing in oil painting, where you're laying color over a color to try and make a different tone, would you do a dry brush? How would you do it?
So, I mean, just as an example, like if right now I, for some reason, wanted to glaze pink over this, I would, we'll do at the top, we'll just do wet to show what that looks like. It's going to visually mix with what's there. And it's going to create mud. So that's really wet. But if I want, I could just get my brush more of a dry brush effect. So right now there's mostly just a thin coating of pigment on the hairs, barely any water. And this is dry brush.
Yeah.
And I think it's much more effective.
Yeah.
So yeah. And if you do that with like 6
Hold
different
that up
colors,
again, I think, so they can see that. Hold that. Oh yeah. See,
it's really cool.
Nice effect.
Yeah. And if you do that with like 6 different colors, subtle differences in each one, visually at the end, it's just going to be a strong effect of layering, and visually it's going to create a new color. So it's a very cool thing with gouache is you can do all these different techniques.
Patricia is asking, she says, I'm doing a very large commission piece, 40 by 48 inches. Do you recommend gouache for a big painting like that?
If you want, yeah. This is the biggest one I've done lately. If you see me compared to it, it's pretty big for gouache, but I typically dilute my first layer or two. So that stretches the gouache a lot farther. So if you can work in that way, that will help. Otherwise, if you're using really thick gouache, you're going to maybe go through a few tubes of it. So it's up to you. But right. I think it looks beautiful, large
now, somebody
scale.
was asking, can you mix watercolor and gouache together?
Yeah, definitely. I do it all the time. You can even use your watercolor palette and add white to the watercolor and just make it more opaque. And it'll definitely desaturate it and lighten it, but it can look kind of cool.
Yeah. So if you guys have had any kind of an epiphany today, something that you learned that's new to you, make sure you put something in the comments so that we can see what you learned. Okay, what are you showing here?
Oh, I was just going to show. So these are just these brown cards that I'll tape to my palette or to a flat sheet and take them outside with me to do plein air. And this is pretty thin gouache in the background, but it's still opaque. It's still standing out against that really dark brown card. And it's just really thin paper. It's nothing fancy, but I just wanted to show this because you don't have to use super thick layers or super, like a ton of opaque white or anything to make an impact on a piece. You can work kind of thin and quick when you're outside with it and still get get the effect that you want.
So Scott Christensen, when he was at the plein air convention, he pulled out these little brown pieces of paper, and he likes to paint on brown because it shows through. You get that nice little bit of brown showing through that you have under the water there.
Yeah, exactly. You can use it to your advantage. You don't have to paint the brown. It's already there for you. Yeah.
He'll be teaching on Gouache Live as well.
Okay.
Well, Sarah, this has been wonderful. Come back. Oh, you're back already. Good.
Yes, there you go.
Is this painting behind you a gouache painting?
No, that's a tapestry just covering my ~𝗲𝗵 printing station. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We've put all your information, your Instagram and everything into the chat so people can find you. You have a YouTube channel of your own. Make sure to check that out. She has a Patreon page, a lot of good things, and make sure to support her. She's a rock star.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Sarah. And
Thanks,
I hope that we'll get you back to one of the retreats sometime, and maybe, who knows, maybe we'll come over to Scotland and hang out.
That would be wonderful. That'd be great. Take you to the good spots.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in today.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. So I want to tell you guys one more thing. Thank you to Sarah Burns for being on today. If you're if you're an artist and you're kind of thinking about selling your artwork, I got something for you. So last year, you know, I teach a lot of marketing. I run a marketing mastermind for artists. And last year, people are like, hey, we need help, we need help, we need help. And so we did a thing in early January to help you crush your year. Some of the people in my mastermind have exceeded their goals, and most of them have hit their goals. And so we're going to do some stuff on an event for you coming up in November. We decided to do it in November because it helps you plan your year and get ahead, which is really the right time to do it. So we want you to save the date. If you go to it's artbizmastery.com. That shows all of our things, but there's another slide in there that shows the event, and it's Art Business Mastery Day. And if you go to artbizmastery.com, you can learn about Art Biz Mastery Day and sign up. It's a one-day event, and it's going to be really spectacular. So we hope that you will do it and check it out. And just go to artbizmastery.com. Again, we have a free gift for you today. If you missed it, it's tips on gouache painting. It's a free ebook, 7 amazing gouache tips. Just go to gouachelive.com/7 reasons. And I cannot emphasize enough, you know, gouache has its place. And I do oils, I do water, I do pastel, I do gouache. Everything has its place. But I took gouache with me to China because I wanted to have the effect and impact of oil paint, but I didn't want to take my oil paints with me because I didn't want to have to travel with all the heavy paints and everything. So I had a relatively small kit. As a matter of fact, I shot a video while I was in China. I took a videographer with me, and I've got a gouache video that we're going to produce soon. But anyway, it's really terrific for times like this when you want to just pick up a brush. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning at yoga, and I like the fact that with gouache or with watercolor, I could just dip in and start from scratch. I don't have to put fresh colors out or anything. I can, you know, if you want to get the tube colors, but I can go back into the dry colors and reactivate. Whereas, you know, with my oils, I got to put all the oils out. It's just different. So I love them all, but this is a really great medium, and we hope that you'll try it. Thanks again to Sarah. Thanks for tuning in today. We're here every weekday at 12 noon and have been since COVID began. So we've got hundreds and hundreds, actually thousands of shows, and we hope that you'll go back and look at them. We believe anybody can learn to paint. If you watch just 5 of our shows, then we believe you'll get the confidence to go, you know what, I can do this. And then we have had people all over the world tell us that they've learned to paint from this program. So we like that. Now, on Mondays, we do Art Marketing Mondays. On Fridays, we do feedback so you can send in paintings to have critiqued. And but it's all good. All right. We love you guys. Thanks for being here. And we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.